He wants to abolish the penny?
He doesn't want to abolish it as much as he wants to give his boss a reason why we can't.
Well, it's stupid.
Yeah, the thing is, it isn't really.
Really?
Turns out the majority of pennies don't circulate. They go in jars, sock drawers. 2/3 of the pennies produced in the last 30 years have dropped out of circulation.
You've been reading about this?
It's interesting.
No, it's not.
The Mint gets letters with pennies taped on notebook paper, letters from citizens who have found the pennies on the street and mailed them back to the Treasury to help pay down the debt.
It's almost hard to believe that plan hasn't worked.
It's also bad for the environment. Production requires the mining of millions of tons of copper and zinc each year.
Zinc?
In 1982, they changed the composition to 97.5% zinc and only 2.5% copper.
Sam.
I'm turning into one of the final people.
Yeah.
Oh, Mark, you're muted.
Good morning. Welcome to the morning meeting. As if we needed any more proof that there is a West Wing episode for everything. Thank you for joining. Sean, President Trump left the Super Bowl and announced the pennies are going away. What do you think about that?
Congratulations. Another wasteful thing checked off. They cost, what, 2.83 cents each to produce a penny. So for all of the enumerated reasons that Rob Lowe stated, plus the actual cost that it takes to produce a single penny, I am pro penny abolishment.
Dan?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, one less thing to have in the pocket.
By the way, just an interesting take on the West Wing thing. We'll see what happens, but I mean, there's a legislative aspect to this, but Trump ordered the Mint last night to just stop producing them. So I do wonder what we're going to see in terms of court action, but minus that, it actually could be the end of the penny.
I wonder how many pennies are made a day, and I wonder what will happen to the existing pennies if, how long what's our need for new pennies every year? I don't know, why do we need new pennies? Like, why the old?
Well, I think because of what Rob said, people put them in jars and don't take them out of circulation.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for joining. Big day here at Two-Way. Later in the program, we'll be joined by our new colleagues, Meghan McCain and Michael Moynihan. Probably most of you are familiar with both of them. But if you're not, you'll be pleasantly delighted. They'll be joining existing programs as well as doing their own shows here on Two-Way. We're expanding. As I said to you throughout the last few months, we're expanding to other topic areas, not just politics. Michael and Meghan are both experts on politics, but they also are deep into culture and other things. And so you'll see them later in this episode, but you'll see them regularly on Two-Way with their own programs. But again, also part of our general programming, including on breaking news. So we're excited about that. As always, I'll run through the day book. We'll take everything around, and then we'll want your participation. So if you're here on the Two-Way platform, please raise your electronic hand. Delighted to see the reaction.
Hey, Mark.
To Yeah.
Mark, real quick, because I'm picking this up in the chat. I just want to be clear. Some people are asking this. They're not joining the morning meeting. They're having.
I mean, they're joining the morning meeting today. Just introduce themselves at the end, but they'll be on their own programs. But they'll be on Two-Way tonight. They'll be on breaking news, special events.
But no, the answer to the question is no. It doesn't mean less time for audience participation.
No. The format and cast of this show is unchanged. Again, if you're on this platform, raise your hand if you want to be in the conversation. And if you're on X or YouTube, thank you for joining. Peace, love, and understanding. I've been delighted to see that on X, a platform normally associated with sewage, the reaction to the announcement about Meghan and Michael has been quite nice for the most part, including by Dan, who tweeted something very nice. So grateful to people for treating their arrival with the presumption of grace and generosity rather than spewing hatred. So thank you for that. Again, raise your hand if you want to be part of the conversation. All right. President Trump, the White House continues to, probably because the president hasn't decided what he wants to do until late in the game, didn't put out his schedule until just a few moments ago. No public events as of this moment, but expect that to potentially change. As of now, 11 o'clock receives his intelligence briefing, and then 1 o'clock he signs executive orders, but this is in the Oval, but it's listed as closed press. He said he was going to announce tariffs. Now, I know we should take the president seriously and sometimes literally, but remember, Donald Trump has a history of saying he's going to do stuff the next day, in the next 2 weeks, et cetera, and then not. So it's possible he won't announce tariffs today. We'll talk about that in just a moment. The vice president is, I don't know if he's left yet, but he's going to France for this AI conference. He'll be at that for a couple days, and then next weekend He goes to Germany for his first 2 overseas trips. There's a Democratic-led protest outside USAID today. Details on that. I don't know exactly who's going to be there, but I think it'll be very similar to what we saw in the previous protest there. Capitol Hill, House and Senate are both in. House leadership of both parties are holding private meetings this evening. The Senate this afternoon or early evening will hold a cloture vote on Tulsi Gabbard, which is expected to pass. Her confirmation expected early in the week, and then later in the week, Bobby Kennedy is expected to be confirmed. And their House tonight has some votes, including on some financial services bills. Gentlemen, when did you turn off the Super Bowl, Dan?
When they scored that long touchdown late in the third, I said that's it.
Sean?
There is difference. Tune out halftime, turn off after the game. I mean, I was multitasking somewhere. Actually, I didn't even watch the halftime show. I thought that's a whole nother story. But yeah, by halftime, it was kind of clear that this was not going Taylor's way.
I will say, like, I wanted a good game, but as a morning person, I was not upset that I could go to bed early.
Yeah. All right. I'm glad you both enjoyed it. Tariffs. Again, a great story in the Wall Street Journal today. If you haven't read it, it explains something that's kind of been out there, but they do a nice job of codifying it. There's sort of 3 buckets of tariff purposes, and some tariffs can have multi-purposes. There's tariffs to leverage non-tariff issues, like saying control fentanyl, control the border. There are tariffs that are reciprocal, that are meant to respond to both formal and informal trade barriers. The United States has long believed that Europe, Asia, Latin America, pretty much every other country has these non-tariff barriers that have created an unlevel playing field. And so the president is looking at some tariffs, he says, to do that. And then there's the third category, which is a very controversial one, not that the other 2 aren't, which is tariffs to raise money. The notion that tariffs will bring in revenue that will allow taxes to be reduced and the deficit to be reduced. There's a lot of skepticism on that point, not just amongst liberal economists and liberal New York Times writers, but even some Republicans in Congress think that thing is not serious. So, as I said, Sean, the president said he's going to do these aluminum and steel tariffs today, and tariffs for the whole world later in the week. Is this happening or not?
I think so. The one issue, there's 2 issues that I think, if you go back and look at Donald Trump going back into the 80s, that he's consistent on. It's immigration and tariffs, or market access, tariffs being the tool to get you primarily that. So when he says tariffs on steel and aluminum and Europe's next, I don't think there's any question. Now, how it manifests itself, I can't tell you the exact day or hour, but there's no question it's going to happen on both fronts.
Dan?
I mean, I won't dare try to predict if it will or will not happen and for how long, because they're tossing these out all the time. I mean, I think the challenge, Mark, even with what you just listed, is how many times can you go to the well on this? I mean, it's okay. We want it for non-economic purposes like fentanyl and the border crisis. We want it for bread and butter of like actual economic and market access. Then we want it because we want to raise revenue. He said in the Fox interview, I'm going to come back and see if Mexico and Canada have done enough, but he won't really define it. At some point, the kind of constant churn, the constant threat, the chaos can become a problem for us in that increasingly CEOs are saying, this is a little chaotic, and it's the one thing that companies want the most is stability. Tell us what the rules are, even if they're bad, and we will make a plan and operate in that system. If you're constantly throwing out uncertainty, which is what he likes to do, it can start to hurt our own economic climate. Consumer confidence dropped here recently. It starts to become a problem.
So there's a couple of things there. Now, remember, part of the reason that you have to say all those different things is, like, for example, in Canada and Mexico's case, we have a trade agreement with them. So you can't openly say we're doing this for, because we want to bring in more money or bring manufacturing home, because the existing trade agreement prohibits that. So they use special emergency powers. If you're a WTO member or part of the reason that they have to go to these various buckets even though the motive may be true, the same behind each, is they publicly have to say something to justify each one of the different things that they do, right? So if you're a WTO member, if you've got an existing trade agreement, then you have to sort of find a weasel way around the existing agreements to do what you have to do. And that's why for Canada and Mexico in particular, we had to say it was the Emergency Powers Act. But I will tell you, like I said, if there's two issues that there's no question where President Trump's default position is, it's immigration and trade.
But I mean, I
Well,
think
feel
that's
like-
the problem, because at some point, and you're starting to see this, countries are like, why should we make agreements with you guys?
But Dan, see, that's where the point is. Ultimately, what Trump wants is all those companies to say it's better to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. and do it here because we know we're not going to get screwed. Trump wants manufacturing and jobs brought back to the U.S. Full stop.
But it's not
right,
just manufacturing. I mean, the problem is it impacts so many other companies in so many different ways that it just creates I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So if I'm thinking of doing a big deal or making a big acquisition, I want to know what that, runway looks like, because I'm putting a lot of money on the line. And I just think you're starting to see more and more businesses they're not criticizing Trump because that's not in their interest. No one wants to go out, but they're just saying kind of time out.
On
And
every
that's
one of these,
stuff.
on every one of these issues, if Democrats are the only ones protesting in Congress, it probably is not going to make a difference. But there is this question of where Republicans reach the end of their rope. Listen to Maria Salazar, Republican Congresswoman from Florida, this morning on Fox and Friends 101, please.
And the president's been talking a lot about tariffs. He's trying to level the playing field, isn't he?
Well, yeah, he's trying to make things right. Trading with the United States is a privilege, not a right. So if you don't play by our rules, we just don't play with you.
Right.
And look what's happening with China.
Sure.
What they're imposing bioterrorism. It's a bioterrorism war with the fentanyl. Fentanyl is the #1 killer for children between 18 and 45. And the president just said it. You cannot continue sending the chemicals to Mexico.
So, Sean, your party used to be a free trade party. Is there any chance that the tariffs, implementation of the tariffs, will cause a meaningful number of Republicans to team with Democrats to say this is bad for the economy?
So I think what President Trump overall has taught, and especially in the area of trade, is that there's a difference between being a free trader and a stupid trader. When we're facing tariffs and non-tariff barriers for our companies to get in, because as a former assistant U.S. trade rep, I will tell you that for a long time, part of our trade policy was goodwill. We were giving countries market access because we wanted them to ally with us in certain things or help improve them. At a certain point, you say to yourself, are we just getting taken advantage of? And I think what Trump has shown us is that that's not free trade. Free trade isn't we pay $100 extra to go into your market, you get to come into ours for free. I think that there's now a discussion about fair trade and equal trade. But for the longest time, part of the tenet of our trade policy was that we wanted to give market access to our country as a tool to them for a variety of political and geopolitical reasons.
Yeah, but I think the challenge with all of this is she says it's a privilege, not a right. Of course. And every other country we do business with has the same exact view. You want to come into our market? It is a privilege, not a right. Trump keeps saying we win, right? We become richer. Well, the trading partner, anytime you do a deal, the other side has to get something out of it. And so the problem is that doesn't seem to work very well because he's all about winning and strength and dominance. And so again, it's one thing with Colombia and Canada and Mexico. The EU together is a big block. China is a big block. It is not that simple as simply saying, like, you guys need to bend, or Mark, what's your line? What's ours is ours and yours, we'll negotiate. That only works when someone's very weak. It's a much harder thing to do when someone can also exert influence back on us. And at the end of the day, question is he bringing prices down? Is he making, the economy stronger? Because if not, people will say, what are we doing?
Besides these issues related to tariffs and the budget issues, what else are you guys looking for this week? What are you expecting Trump and Prime Minister Musk to do? Dan?
I'm watching the Department of Education. This has been a long, target of the right. They've now kind of publicly flirted with this idea of shutting it down. I think one of the things I'm curious about is how do you keep this pace where you have multiple big nuggets every single week? Like at some point, that's why
every hour.
Yeah, like at some point, Musk is going to be done by like Easter. Like you just are going to have like flip the whole government over. So what is the shiny red object? The other thing that I'm watching, which is kind of a sub to both the tariffs and this like federal spending freeze, is there's a story that farmers did not get their payments for crops as part that were going as part of some of this aid overseas. And they were told they're going to get it, but they haven't. The crops are kind of dying in the holding cages. And there's also a story about Republican governors quietly calling Musk and the Trump team to say, hey, as you go after some of these programs, be very careful because we are pretty big receivers of federal money, which is true. A lot of Republican states on a per capita basis receive way more in than they send out. And so I am watching USAID. We keep saying it was the easy target. Now they're going to start getting near the harder targets. And what is the political appetite to start taking on some of these Republican constituencies that you need to keep in the tent?
Sean, what else are you looking for this week?
I think, I mean, I'm with Dan, not just DOE, but I think Trump mentioned that Brett Baer yesterday, the interview yesterday, going after the DOD. And so it's not, I mean, that's what's going to be really interesting. I know everyone's freaked out, but you want to talk about a place where there's a ton of waste. We'll see how long that one takes through. But the thing that was fascinating for me, to Dan's point about the pace and everything else, the CBS poll and a poll that John and Jim McLaughlin put out, both show the president, not just job performance wise getting high marks, but policy wise, the American people are with him on this. And we've talked about this before. It's always this if he goes too far. Well, so far he's actually hitting a nerve that the American people wanted to see, that like he's getting things done. So I think he's just going to keep plowing through in this direction. But each day, to your point, he's really touched on a mix of policy and culture issues. Remember last week was the men and women's sports. And so what does he do? The Greenland, the Gulf of Mexico, last in the Gulf of America now. Like he's found a way to kind of get a bunch of each thing, in each bucket that keeps everybody happy.
Yep. So I think that all these spending issues, there's the continuing resolution government shutdown, there's the debt ceiling, there's the reconciliation choice of one bill or two. I continue to see more logic in one bill because then there's an end of year forcing mechanism and then you only have to round up the votes once. But the Senate's determined to do two bills and you can feel palpably, you can feel the pressure towards the Senate because the House, A, because the House can't get its act together, and B, because there are real problems with waiting to do one bill, including funding things like the border, particularly because it's unlikely they'll get Democratic votes.
The time is the problem, Mark, right? I mean, I think we all can acknowledge that Johnson can't, even yesterday when we got asked about this, was like, well, we're working hard and we're trying to get this, and then we'll put out
let's listen to that. Let's play Speaker Johnson from yesterday's exclusive interview from the Pizza Hut Superdome. What's it called? Something Superdome.
Little Caesars.
Caesars. Little Caesars.
Big Caesars.
Pizza.
Big Caesars.
Caesars. Big Caesars. Play that, please.
I have tremendous respect for Speaker Johnson. I hope the House will move forward soon, but we cannot allow this moment to pass, and we cannot let President Trump's America First agenda stall. One of the things he cites is Borders are Tom Homan and the operations that are going on. He says you're going to run out of money for what's going on at the border, so he's not going to wait for the House. He's moving ahead.
Yes, Lindsey's a good friend. I have great respect for him as well, and I understand what they're engaging in. They want to move the agenda, and so do we. President Trump got a mandate to deliver that America First agenda. He's working at breakneck pace, as you just saw in the opening of the show, to do that with the executive branch, and we're going to do it with legislation. But to do all that in one big bill takes a little bit of time. So we're working through that process very productively. We've been building on this for a year, Shannon. All through last year, we had our committees of jurisdiction working on the ideas to put it together. Last month, we did that in earnest in January. And as recently as this past week, we spent 4.5 hours at the White House on Thursday and 3 hours later that evening working through the final details, and we're very, very close. So I appreciate the Senate's zeal. We have it in the House as well. But as I reminded my friend Lindsey, I have about 170 additional personalities to deal with, and he's only got 53 on the Republican side there. We have, a very diverse caucus with lots of interests, but we are going to get this job done.
So, Sean, there's so many dimensions to this, and obviously it's going to play out over a long period of time. But here's what I don't get. You're starting to see some Republicans say, well, don't cut Medicare, don't cut Medicaid, don't cut USAID at part. We know that you can't make serious dent in the deficit or the debt except through economic growth, but through cuts. But here's what I don't get. They're basically saying, of course we want to cut. Of course we're the party of fiscal discipline. Of course there are going to be massive cuts, 1 trillion, 2 trillion. But they're not preparing people for what that means. This seems like a disaster for them, even if the Democrats remain completely incompetent. It just seems like a disaster. So where's the preparing of the ground to say, yes, there's going to have to be some sacrifice?
Exactly. I mean, the answer is you're right. It's not there. And the worst part is that that's the one area where President Trump, I mean, this was what he said during his entire first term, and everything since has been this entitlement program, Social Security, Medicaid, are where the real dollars are. And if you don't reform that, now I have always argued that Republicans have got to stop calling things cuts when they're reforms. If you can actually put efficiencies in the program or extend deadlines and things like that bring down the overall cost, that's not a cut. And we've got to stop being afraid of our own shadow, right? And saying, hey guys, here's the deal. This program's is insolvent in 5 years or 6 years or 7 years. So if we don't fix it, then no one gets anything and we're bankrupt. So here are some basic things that we can do. And to your point, you've got to go out there and start laying the groundwork, but they are so scared of this. And you're right. That's part of the problem. They can't come up with the real money to get those the savings, because the problem is you've got your Chip Roys on one hand that are saying, I'm not voting for any of this unless it's offset or we reduce the deficit significantly. And then if you go to reduce the deficit significantly, you've got these guys, the Republicans in seats that are held in California, New York, California, elsewhere, that will say, we can't go home and sell this. So the thing that I find fascinating, by the way, is that if I were in Trump orbit right now, first of all, I think you got to get him on board, which is going to be a tough sell. The second thing is there better be an outside group with all this money that they can bring in now to give them some air cover to say that we're saving programs and this is the right way to go, because that's what it's going to take. And part of the reason that Lindsey and the senators want to go first is because it's less money. The tax bill is the big problem. And once you add that into that big, beautiful bill, it really becomes big. Like big. And they know that. And that's why the House wants to take one bite at this. But the Senate guys want to put the wins up on energy, defense, and the border. And that way it buys them some time. But then they also get credit, because here's the deal. If one big, beautiful bill fails, you get nothing. So these guys in the Senate are like, hey, we'd rather put 3 points on the board right now and bank it.
That's one of the benefits. Dan, just 1 second. I want to ask Sean to follow. I can't be smarter than everyone in the Republican Party. How could they not be laying the groundwork for this? They're just setting up for disaster. And this is not like something a year away. It's happening now.
Because the problem, Mark, is that, as I said, this is why, there was that comment about the House, the retreat that we covered down in Doral. They don't actually, the way it works is these guys have these listening sessions. And then the morning that it gets laid out, they walk into a conference and go, you heard Johnson yesterday. What they're really talking about is that top number, the 302A and the 302B in budget parlance. And they want to be able to come out and just hand it to those guys and say, okay, guys, we heard everything through the listening sessions. Today, we're moving it to the floor. Here's the top line number. Let's all go. They can't, because when they have those discussions, people will freak out. And so they're going to hide the ball. They're going to roll it out one day and hope everyone doesn't have time to read it. I mean, God's honest truth, because the real answer is it takes way too long to explain what's going on. And a lot of these guys don't have the fortitude to go home and sell it.
Dan.
Oh, somewhere the Obama and Hillary Clinton teams are just smiling, because this sounds like the Obamacare argument, right? We can't let it fail. It's going to be big. It's too hard to explain all the details, but trust us, you're really going to benefit. Look, let's just start with the fact that one of the things that made Donald Trump special in 2016 is that he said we are not going to touch Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. And it was a sign that he was a little different, that he understood the tripwires with this new cohort of the electorate that he was trying to court. And he did it again most recently. So, I mean, why aren't they laying the foundation? Because he said just the opposite. The people who have talked about this mostly is the Freedom Caucus. If you look at where most of this money goes to, I looked it up this morning. Biggest recipients of Medicare and Medicaid, number 1 and 2 are New York and California, Pennsylvania, Florida, Ohio. I mean, you're talking about states that this is not like blue America is going to be harmed and red America is going to be fine. So I think one problem is the reason it hasn't happened is it is very hard. And what are you offsetting these cuts for? Tax cuts, right? That is a tough political sell because you're going to start explaining where the money's going to. If they go with one bill, you are looking at easily over 1,000 pages. It will likely be over $5 trillion in total spending. And a lot of Republicans are going to get very queasy about having to go home. They won't have read the whole bill. They won't know everything that's in there. There will be losers, and it's all fun and games until you take someone's service away.
All right, let's one more topic. Again, if you'd like to get in the conversation, please raise your hand. So if you think about the Tea Party movement, it was pretty much independent of the formal Republican Party. In fact, there were people in the Republican Party who were threatened by it. Eventually, they kind of merged operations. This weekend, I heard both by chance and through effort from donors, Democratic donors, and grassroots, who are basically saying the Democratic Party, the DNC, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, they don't get it. They're not fighting back. We need to piece together our own grassroots, independent effort to fight Donald Trump, to stop him, and to, by stopping him, improve our chances in the midterms. There's a big New York Times story out about Charlie Kirk, who has built this extraordinary empire that involves content and activism and a close relationship with the formal structure of the party, but operating independent of it. There is no Democratic Charlie Kirk. So Dan, it's that model, the independent model, is that not just the best option, but is that something that could actually emerge and play a role in the fight against Trump in 25 and in the midterms in 26?
Yes, and the irony is we actually were the first to really pioneer this back during the George W. Bush's first term. If you remember, there was a group that was started called Democracy Alliance. George Soros happened to be one of the big funders of it, but they pooled it, and it still exists. They would meet a couple times a year. If you wanted a grant or wanted money for them to make an investment, you came, you pitched them, you talk about how this was going to help the party, and it was mostly around turnout. And it really worked very well. And then in 2008, you had Obama, and it was very controversial. He kind of kept his thing outside the DNC, mostly kind of running in parallel. And then when Trump got elected, it kind of just became so focused on Trump, so focused on stopping him, that it kind of fizzled. It lost its focus and went off in a different direction. Stacey Abrams did a little version of this in 2018, 2020 with success in Georgia. Yes, the party needs to think anew about what are the investments that it needs to be making to build sustainable infrastructure for long-term success. And I think Charlie Kirk is a good example. One of the reasons you do it outside the party is they're willing to sustain losses for a period of time before you can kind of show that there is a way that you can start breaking even or getting close to it, if not turning a profit. And I think the party has so many different needs in terms of how we communicate, how we motivate people, where we find people. It needs to be, Charlie Kirk has a lot of organic energy. We've talked about the Maha movement, the moms, like you want to harness it, but there needs to be, people that are playing a leadership role that can do it as a career, not just one-offs.
Sean.
I'll tell you, this is a subject that I would love to teach at a university. There is so much, Dan mentioned some great examples, but the party structure is such, and what it's meant to do has some guardrails on it in terms of how much it can raise. There's state parties that have to get, assuaged. There's things that you can't say or do because you've got elected people. So there's some handcuffs on parties. And if you look over time, the Democrats were the first to do this a while ago, where they stood up things like NGP Van, Catalyst, and really shed some of the hard money things. People that when hard money was a lot more restricted than it is now. And the Republicans held on to things for a really long time, our voter list, all this stuff, and said, we're not going to bring in outside folks. The roles have kind of switched. And I think that for a lot of reasons, the only way to solve this for the Democrats right now is for an outside entity. The problem is the guys with the big wallets right now, the Soroses and whatever, I don't think share the same view of where the party should go, that a lot of like Dan like-minded Dems actually want to bring it back to a place of like common sense and pragmatism, left leaning, not woke left. And so the problem is they've got to get together, get a big donor thing together and sort of say, these are the core functions. But the last thing I'll say, if the message and the takeaway is we're going to go after Donald Trump, then they've missed the last 10 years. They need to build up what they're for and talk about like a new generation of Democrat coming home. Because if you spend all your time and money going after Donald Trump, you're missing the real goal here.
And you know what, Mark, I'll just add too, because I just remembered this. A great example of who did this really, really well in the Democratic Party is Colorado. In 2003, 2004, 5 people got together. Jared Polis, now governor, was one of them. He was young. Pat Stryker was another, the heiress. And they overhauled everything. Opposition research, both on candidates internally and Republican candidates. They got very aggressive with recruitment. They got very aggressive cleaning up and building an entire new get out the vote operation. They built some infrastructure around communications that was at the time like very, very novel and nimble. And they basically told the Colorado party, like, if you want to join us, you can. But Colorado is still having success 20 some odd years later because they built this, sustained it, and never stopped kind of trying to improve it.
Dan, what do you think about the Pod Save America guys, Maddow, Chris Hayes? What do you think about them as part of this firmament? Are they a valuable part of some sort of ad hoc resistance from the outside?
They're valuable because you have to have the echo chamber that repeats it and pushes it out. But they're not out there or doing the nitty gritty of organizing conferences, going on college, campuses, going into communities, having the ears low to the ground. Whoever this entity is or entities that start to create the organic energy, you then want those people to give it voice they have audiences, they have megaphones. Because I've said this before, one of the beauties of the right is you have the Charlie Kirks, you have Trump, and then you have this entire ecosystem on cable, podcasters, etc., that all push a unified message. Now online influencers as well, all the people that can go on, and next thing you know, it's 5, 10, 15, 20 million people, and it's being pushed out. That's where those people can be helpful, but they won't be the tip of the spear. They'll just be kind of with a megaphone.
I kind of feel like they missed the boat. And I'm not saying, I think that what they built, like Favreau and those guys at Pod Save America, is to be commended. I mean, like it at the time and what they've done, I don't know that they ever wanted to do that, but what they built, I think, you got to give them credit for that. But to Dan's point, it was one directional. It was like, we're going to build a platform to have discussions.
One way, not two way.
That's right. And what Charlie built, I mean, I went out to Arizona and visited. It's like a college campus. It's massive what Turning Point has turned into. 850 chapters. I mean, when I was on campus a few years ago, it's a joke. We didn't even really have a college. You could get the whole college Republicans to meet in my dorm room. And now Charlie's built this network where it's cool to be Republican on campus. They've got 850 chapters. They do these massive events where, the president comes. I mean, it's bigger than, I'd rather go to a Turning Point USA conference than the Republican National Convention.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's fun. And he's turned that into an army of people, as Dan mentioned, like these influencers that Charlie's built up. And a lot of the people in the Maha movement, Alex Clark being one of them, kind of came up through Turning Point and Charlie. So when he talks about an army of people, it's literally an army.
Yeah. One thing that I've never read about or heard about and not done reporting on, but I've been thinking a lot about is, as the Tea Party rose, the left ignored it. The left didn't do anything to obstruct its development. First, because they didn't take it seriously. Then they didn't really understand it. Then it was kind of too late. Okay. if there is a resistance movement that rises, you can bet that people like Charlie Kirk will try to strangle it in the crib. They will do everything they can to keep it from growing powerful. They'll highlight its donors. They'll dox the leaders who emerge as valuable. They'll do everything they can to keep it from growing. And so it's a bigger challenge because, as I said, the Tea Party just kind of grew unencumbered to the point where it was an unstoppable force in the midterms.
The difference with the Tea Party, though, is it splintered, right? I mean, that was the thing is Charlie at least has held on to this effort and he's in control of it. There's no question who's at the wheel. The Tea Party had like 5 heads to it and got greedy and whatever. By the way, one quick point that happened over the weekend, just a personal privilege here. President Trump just truthed again this morning. He fired everyone on the Service Academy boards. Congratulations, President Trump. Joe Biden started it.
You going back on, John?
I don't have an announcement at this time.
Okay, thank you. Janice, welcome.
One thing to be careful about, though, is the Tea Party had a lot of old school interests, like the Koch brothers and others, totally funding it, organizing it. And so it wasn't just an organic,
Yeah, no question, but it grew unencumbered. But you're right.
Totally. And I also think one thing that'll make our efforts much harder, Barack Obama and Joe Biden were fairly aloof to the day-to-day of politics. Donald Trump is so keen and so focused on like culture and what is happening out there that it is hard to think of getting around him on like if he sees an issue building, he will try to head it off himself as well as these other people.
It's a great point.
Makes this much harder. Yep.
Great point. Janice, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Happy to have you here. Tell folks where you are and what's on your mind, please.
I'm broadcasting from Valdosta, Georgia, which is South Georgia. We're about 15 miles from Florida. I just want to say I enjoy your show very much. I get a lot of information from it. I like the balanced approach to it. I was born and raised a Democrat. Stayed one till 2016. That's when the party began to lose me. I agree with what RFK said about that. I didn't leave them; they left me. Dan, I appreciate your approach to it. Why don't you come over to our side now? We got a big tent. What I'd like to say is that I'd like to ask, how do y'all see the current state of the Democratic Party media? Because to me, as just a normal voter, they're dead. They're basically dead. The future is the social media platforms. I think it was proven out in the last election how much influence they have. I don't think that there's any way with the current state of affairs that we can ever let another Democrat win. And I mean the progressive left Democrat, the radical lunatics that President Trump calls them. Moderate Democrats, welcome.
Janice, I'm gonna let Dan and you chat, but let me ask you a question. Will you vote for John Ossoff for Senate?
Heck no.
Okay.
Neither him nor Warnock. They're both an embarrassment to our state, and as well as Stacey Abrams. She needs to go back in her corner and stay there.
Okay. Is there a Democrat who's in elective office today in Georgia or in Washington or in a governorship who you like and think is good?
I like John Fetterman.
Okay.
I think he's a common sense head of the Democratic Party right now because they don't have a leader right now.
Okay. Dan, you and Janice chat it up.
Yeah. Well, Janice, I think your last statement is true. We don't necessarily have a natural leader. I'll disagree with you slightly. Kamala Harris got about 48.5% of the vote, right? It wasn't 55-45. It was still a very close election. Trump won the popular vote. He won all the swing states. We picked up seats in the House, right? And we lost them in the Senate. The trend lines are against us right now. No doubt about it. We need to make some changes. But this is not after 1984 or 1980 when the Democratic Party was really, really in serious trouble. I think the good news for the Democratic Party is there is a recognition that things need to change. There is a recognition that on social issues, we have gone too far, that we have turned off and lost a lot of people. That's why you don't see fights on DEI. You don't see people defending some of the transgender bill signing the other day. I saw very few, I saw some, but very few people coming out and saying this was a terrible thing. And if, we get power, we're going to undo it. So I think there is recognition of change. And I think part of the problem is we need to win back the RFK and Bernie voters. And we need to win back moderate, I guess, I don't know what you want to call them, pro-business, like kind of center right people. So we've got work cut out, but we're not that far away, even though it can feel like it right now because Trump's on a roll.
I just wanted to say one other thing. I think that if everybody had a true picture of who Kamala Harris was, and everybody knows that she espouses communist Marxist beliefs, I don't think they would have voted for her if they truly love this country. But the Democrats right now, the progressive radical left Democrats have everybody believing that they want our country to fail. And until the moderate Democratic Party distances itself from these radical beliefs and peoples, it will never win another election.
Yeah.
Sean, besides doing the Snoopy dance, anything you want to say?
No, I will say this. Parties tend to go through I like to say a family fight at a certain point. We did it in our party for a while, and it'll be interesting to see how and when that happens. If you are really honest with yourself, I think we had that open conversation after the 2012 election. We figured out what we need to do as a party and to modernize, to get things right. It will be interesting to see whether the Democratic Party and the DNC, which are two separate things, if you will, are willing to have that discussion among themselves.
Janice, thank you for coming in. We hope you'll come back regularly. And
thank you, Mark. Thank you, guys, and I'll be watching.
All right, maybe we'll bring you on with John Ossoff at some point. That would be a good.
Oh,
program.
I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. All right. John, come on in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind, please, after you unmute. John, you're up. Ooh, John. Let's see. John McCutcheon. Yes, sir. There you go. Unmute.
I'm unmuting. Thank you for letting me speak to you guys. I've enjoyed it from the very beginning. I'm applauding your growth. I always looked forward to Mark's rehabilitation on this Mercana show. I have never been disappointed. I've looked forward to every single thing he has said. Now I'm a huge Dan Turrentine fan, and I've always been a Sean fan. And I also have a picture of Meghan McCain's parents on my back wall here, which is something I've had since a long period of time. Look, Dan, here's my pushback to what you're saying. Number one, and this is to Mark a little bit too, the Tea Party and the Freedom Caucus now are behind the curve because the momentum of movements is exponentially greater with the help of all the platforms like Two-Way. You watch Meghan McCain come on here and drag Tulsi, and RFK appears across the finish line. And that was just simply due to this platform and everybody, including me, who wrote in. The Freedom Caucus guys, let's say, if they get on the wrong side of common sense, they're going to lose. I'm sitting here in Houston, Texas, and I promise you, and I don't need to mention any names, but our senators and our representatives understand that we are all about all the things that the Republican Party are doing right now. We all know there are common sense. It's common sense to not overrun our country with immigration that's not vetted. It's common sense to find fraud and abuse in our government because we know it's there. It's common sense to make reasonable deals with our trading partners. Yes, they need to buy goods from us because they need American dollars, or they can't buy anything else. So they're going to play ball with us, regardless of what you think. I mean, they can't print American money yet, although I'm sure China's trying to figure out how to do it. You have to have a common sense answer in the Middle East. Everything has not worked. And I know, Mark, you've written about this. You've been hugely involved in trying to understand how Israel can fix the problem. No one's come up with an answer. Maybe this is an answer, but at least it's a common sense approach. You have to have a common sense approach to the proxy wars. We're all tired of funding them. And even the military industrial complex is going to come to heel here pretty quickly, because people are sick and tired of watching guns and weapons go someplace that have nothing to do with helping us here at home. That's the momentum that Trump is riding on right now. I do think you're going to find Democrats like John Fetterman. You can't be against common sense. How can you be against common sense and win? You're going to have to get on that side a little bit and start being for something.
Yep, John, I'll say, as I say to many of the people who come on this program, you speak for tens of millions. So thank you for that. Do you have a question you want to ask Dan, or you just want us to comment
Dan,
on what you
I
said?
would like to understand what you believe inside the party. You see the success of John Fetterman. You heard Janice, bless her heart, I love her to death. She spoke the truth. John Fetterman is not somebody that probably most Republicans would have supported. However, he looks like he just wants to do what seems to make the most sense for his constituents. So what do you say to all the other Democrats out there who don't seem to want to follow that lead?
Dan.
I mean, a couple things. I think, one, every member of Congress stands for reelection. And so John Fetterman thinks it is best, as you say, to represent the people of Pennsylvania with the stances that he's taking, right? He just watched his colleague, Bob Casey, lose an election. I think that, it's always dangerous to tell another member of Congress, hey, you need to make huge changes, when in the House, they all just stood for reelection. They all won. And by the way, party picked up seats in the House. So we have net losses. And as one of the Steve Elmendorf, who came on a couple weeks ago, said, Tammy Baldwin, a gay member of the Senate in Wisconsin, just got reelected, the same state Donald Trump won. So it's hard to say, hey, your politics are totally wrong, you're out of touch with your electorate. They'd say, oh yeah, take a look. I think what for our party and what you just said, immigration, fraud and abuse, trade, it's a little bit of apple pie. The reason we're saying the Tea Party and the Freedom Caucus are going to have a hard time is you're now going to get into the harder issues. Is it common sense to cut Medicare and or I'll even be generous, Sean's line, reform Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security and cut taxes by $5 trillion? Yeah. Hold on. You can't do the tax cuts. You can't do the cuts and still net out at about zero. You're going to have some deficit spend. I'm asking, that is a public policy discussion that the country is perhaps on the verge of having. I think everyone on this platform will have different definitions of what is common sense. Where you are in Texas, you are the third biggest recipient, or fourth, I think, of Medicare and Medicaid, right? You have multiple military bases, military retirees with benefits, etc. Is it common sense for Texas to take a haircut on that to achieve other goals? I think that's where this is going to get messier. Democratic Party is probably going to have a different view of this. I think Trump is going to have a slightly different view of this than a lot of members of his own party. So let's see what is common sense 6 months from now.
Well, let me answer that. Number one, no one's talking about cutting Medicare and Medicaid benefits.
John,
that's not true at all. They are.
No, they're talking about cutting the fraud and abuse to the people. If I apply to Medicare, I don't get a benefit. It goes to the provider. If there's fraud and abuse to the provider, that's what's going to get cut. And the reason we have the largest Medicaid.
John, I'm sorry to cut you off.
That's right.
It's a hugely important topic. We hope you'll come back talk about it. But we've dug in a bit. But stay with us for 1 second. I'm going to bring Megan in and Michael, and just tell us and tell Megan why do you have a picture of her folks up in your office?
Hey Megan, it's a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you very much.
Oh, she's muted.
Thank you so much. When you just said that, it just made me a little emotional. It's so beautiful. Thank you.
Yes, my brother-in-law was the former Secretary of Commerce for George Bush the original George Bush, and he was hugely involved in your dad's campaign. He thought he was too good a man to not have the support of the Republican Party. And my family and I personally spent a lot of time raising money and went to all kinds of events and had the privilege and pleasure of listening to your father speak the wisdom that is only gained by the experience that can never be refilled. And that was a privilege and a pleasure. And that's why I've always kept the picture of both your parents, up in my office since those very early days, and a signed copy of his book on my coffee table in my office.
Thank you so much. That's really beautiful. I'm really touched by that. I'm going to call my mom after and tell her. And thank you for all your support. And it's really always beautiful to hear something like that. He's still so alive, even though he's been dead almost 7 years.
Well, anyway, go girl.
John, thank you for joining. Sorry,
I mean,
I had
that's
to
the
cut you off.
best
Please come back.
introduction, Megan, you could ever have. Right there.
Oh, I know. Thank you, John. Come on every day with me.
All right.
you.
So Megan and Michael are here, and again, they're going to be on the two-way platform. We couldn't be more excited to have you both here. Michael, why are you joining two-way?
Why am I joining two-way, Mark? I thought I explained that to you. I have to explain it to everyone else now too.
Yeah, let everybody in on the secret.
Look, I mean, I've been on this call today. I catch this as much as I can. I learn a lot from you and I steal it. I'm a bit of a plagiarist and I kind of recite some of your stuff on the fifth column. And everyone thinks it's my own. Everyone thinks I'm incredibly clever and it's all because of you. But when I watch two-way, you have managed to do something that I still don't understand it, is that you have all these people on here who are amazingly clever and incredibly civil and nice to each other. And I mean, we get that at the fifth column when we do calls like this, but that's because it's an echo chamber. And everyone agrees with you. I mean, you guys manage to get people who disagree with each other and have these civil conversations. And when we talk about the kind of decline in the discourse, two-ways are just a great example of how you can kind of counter program that. And so, yeah, I'm incredibly happy to be a part of two-way. And also because I get to work alongside comrade Meghan McCain. I do not have a picture of her parents up. I don't even have a picture of my own parents.
I'll send you one.
So just, if you can just email me something to print out, I'll just put it over my shoulder because I love both of them. Yeah, so I mean, working with Meghan is great. And we've worked together in the past, many, many years ago on a TV show even. So it's terrific. And I was just a guest on her podcast this year, which was fantastic and really fun. So yeah, I'm extraordinarily excited about joining two-way.
Our goal is to have programs that are sophisticated, fun, civil, and build community through authentic conversation. And Megan, you are the personification of those things. So we couldn't be happier to have you here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to join. And Michael, it's so nice it's weird and amazing that we're joining together because Michael and my career have intersected a lot throughout the years.
Yes.
And we have a ton of friends and you're friends with my husband and I love the fifth column like everybody else in media does. And I'm very excited to have an announcement with your name on it too, because you're a cool kid and I've never been a cool kid. It's fine. Mark and Dan and Sean, you're all brilliant. And I've really loved getting to know you, Dan and Sean and Mark, who I have known for, I can't even remember the first time I met you, Mark. I was talking to my mom about this and I was like, I think I was like 15. It's a really long time ago. And, one of the things that I'm excited about this platform is how respectful everyone is. I've worked in a lot of not respectful spaces and you're just like the most respectful man, Mark, Dan, Sean, you too. And I'm just really excited to join. And I'm like in a different phase in my life. I'm 40. I have 2 young kids and I really am excited to work in a space that people are so just like understand how the world is. And I keep thinking of like the moment that I thought I might want to work with you, Mark. And it was when Joe Biden was dropping out and you announced it and you called it with your reporting. And I told you this already the other day, like I was at a water park in Sedona with my kids and I still zoomed into two-way and I was like, I look ridiculous. I have a camo hat on and I'm in like a bathing suit cover up and there's people screaming, but I have to talk about what this means for the country. And I did. And it was just like, I love the instant gratification of this as well. And it's a fun, cool, buzzy company and I'm just really excited to join.
One, I have to say one thing about
Yeah, go ahead.
Sean Spicer. Dan, I don't know either Dan or Sean. I'm admirers of both, but a long time ago, Sean was I believe from memory, the communications director at the RNC, and I was trying to get into an event. And I was at Vice at the time. People don't want to have Vice people at an RNC event. Very difficult to get in. Someone said, email Sean Spicer. And they gave me your email. And you responded and got me into the event in about 10 minutes. Me, for some unknown reason, you decided to take pity on me and let me in. And I just remembered that the other day. So have been in my good books for a very long time, Sean, because of that.
Thanks for outing me.
I was well behaved when I was there too, so didn't reflect poorly on you at all.
Sean, do you want to do any hazing or welcoming?
No. I just, while we have a couple minutes, first of all, thank you, appreciate the kind comments. I would just, to Megan, I mean, here's the thing that is fascinating to me. Let's just assume for the sake of the discussion that RFK and Tulsi make it over the finish line this weekend. Is there anyone is this to you guys? I'm fascinated by the movement behind them, in the sense that so many strong, conservative, powerful people have gotten behind two, as of a year ago, longtime Democrats. Is there a scenario where you guys like sort of harness this? Is it two and done? Like, hey, they're over, let's go relax now? Or is it like, let's figure out the next person or subset to get behind? Because I'm so fascinated by what's happened in particular with this group of women that is sort of become its own. I mean, you can describe it, but obviously you guys all hang out together too. So whether it's a coalition or just a strong friendship, but is it once they're over the finish line, we kind of we'll stay on our text chain, or do you guys harness this and say, hey, let's try to get some other people over?
For me or Michael or both?
For you. Yeah.
Oh. I mean, actually, Michael, as you know, because I can remember talking to you offline during COVID, I was deeply radicalized during COVID. And it was a combination of how I was treated when I worked at ABC and was treated in my response to saying that defunding the police is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. My questions about the vaccine, I was pregnant during the time, and I turned into a Maha mom during that time. And me and all my girlfriends and all the people I know did too. And although, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, as I've said, my children are fully vaccinated in the normal round out. They do not have the COVID vaccine, and I'm not going to be giving it to them because I have a lot of questions about it. And even just saying that could have gotten me fired, and I think led to my leaving. And so it was like the beginning of the groundwork. And through that, it was like, we always joke, it was like the French underground. Like I found other women and people who were feeling the way I did. And we were like coming together in this community, which led to Jessica Krause. Tulsi and I have been friends for 8 years, like a really long time, but she was a huge support to me during that time as well. And I just found people that were listening and believing in me. And it turns out my rage was hundreds of millions of other people, not just women, I think men too, in the country. And I mean, I would vote for Tulsi for president easily. I would certainly consider voting for RFK if he decided to be pro-life. That's a big thing to me. I'm ready for radical change, just like everybody else. And people are always fascinated by that because obviously I come from a very establishment background, but that period of time, I will never forget and never forgive what the government and the Democrats did to me and my family during that time. I will never, ever forgive it, and I'll remember it for the rest of my life. And now how I vote, locally, is extremely important to me as much as nationally. And it's turned me into this, this political person that I thought I was the only one, but there's, like I said, hundreds of millions of us in that coalition. I'm 100% certain Tulsi and RFK are going to win this weekend. They better. I'm hosting a party for her, so she better get over. But
so is the invite coming by text or email? Just so I keep
right, exactly.
You're going to be the person of honor. But I just feel like, I'm so happy right now because I feel really heard and really seen, and the people like me feel heard and seen. And there's a really strong segment of millennial people and millennial moms. Every mom I know who was pregnant during COVID, like me, I mean, they feel the same way. And I'm really happy it's Republicans sorry, I'm filibustering, but I'm really glad Republicans got them instead of Democrats.
Just to put a button on it, to go to Sean's question, does the movement that you all created sustain past their confirmations to other issues?
Yes. Never forget. And it's not just me. I'm a baby part of this. This is a huge, I would give Jessica a lot more. She has, millions of followers and whatever, but I will be 100 years old. I'll never forget ever what Democrats did to me and my family during COVID. And I want like revenge.
Go ahead,
But
Michael.
the challenge becomes like, and this
Sorry,
was the case,
Dan.
with the Obama, coalition once they got in power, is I hear you, Megan, that the Democrats make you upset, but of course we're in the minority and we don't have a lot of power. The issue is going to become what happens when compromise starts having to be made within the family tent. Can the passion be sustained into the spring and the summer? Let's say if it's one beautiful bill, or the hard second one starts coming up. Is there still that passion on the HHS hearing and rulemaking on something, and it's getting ground down? That'll be the, because if it is, then that is truly a movement.
Quick to add something quick to that. I mean, I'd be interested to see if we have those kind of ideological fractures that we saw the first time around with somebody like Steve Bannon. I mean, Bannon just gave 2 interviews, one to Ben Smith, I think it's Semaphore, who broke the story of us coming over here today, and the Wall Street Journal. And, he was kind of soft pedaling it a bit, but, he loathes Elon Musk. And that's for deeply ideological reasons. I mean, when I interviewed Bannon the second or third time, he was going off on how much he loved AOC when the cameras were off. He was like, she's fantastic. I think the auto bailouts should have been bigger. And you see this interview that he did yesterday saying, well, they all hate Lena Khan. I want to give Lena Khan more power. And, when Elon Musk is out tweeting clips of, Tom Sowell and, various free market economists that probably make his skin crawl. But I think to Megan's point, 2020, I mean, everybody has books on their shelves that have a year, 1968, the year everything changed, 1948, Henry Wallace, everything changed. I think that 2020 is going to get, so many of those books, because the ideological fracture that you saw with Trump in 2016, people didn't really cop onto it. That, there was something very different from those of us who loved Cato white papers about economics. And then all of a sudden 2020 happens, and you have people that are all of a sudden attracted to RFK Jr. And that's because of vaccine stuff. That's because of all the COVID nonsense. So I think, and in the George Floyd stuff, it really fractured the country in a weird way. And it wasn't traditional ideological lines. And we see that kind of realignment. But Dan, to your question, I mean, I don't know how sustainable it is in the long run. I mean, we're in this moment where everyone's super excited to be breaking things. Let's break more things. But, where are we going to be in a year? God knows.
We're over, so I'll say this. We just got an excellent Ben cameo, so I'm grateful for that.
I can't believe you just did that, by the way. I cannot believe you just did that. It's you.
Very unprofessional, Ben.
That was excellent.
Get out of here.
You getting his next, should get in his next live shot. Thank you both. Great to see you both. We'll have more, we'll have announcements soon about when their shows will debut, what time they'll be on, what days. You'll want to be part of them. And again, they're part of the two-way format. So thank you both, and we'll see you soon. This show will be back tomorrow. Again, our usual format, Dan and Sean and myself. Tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern time, I'll be on Two-Way Tonight. The folks from International Intrigue will join us. We'll talk about tariffs. We'll talk about the Middle East. We'll talk about everything that's going on, and we'll do news a day regular too. So join us at 6 o'clock tonight. And again, the three of us back tomorrow. And as I said, we could not be happier to have Michael and Megan with us. I've been asked who the next person is. The next person is, because we're just hiring people with MM, is we're going to have an AI generated hologram of Mickey Mantle, who will be hosting a sports show. So stay tuned for that as well. Thank you, everybody. Welcome, Megan and Michael. See everybody tonight at 6.